The road from Augsburg to Mezzana is stunning, or at least the bits I could hold my eyes open for were. After a week's excitement, I couldn't help nodding off in the van, but as always, the majesty of the mountains transfixed my attention as we crossed the Brenner Pass. I'd been lucky enough to paddle in Mezzana just a couple of weeks earlier on my grand Plastic Fantastic tour of Italy and Austria. Then I'd rocked up completely oblivious as to our destination, only to be greeted with a large sign advertising the event we were now competing in. While I'd only managed a couple of laps on that flying visit, it was almost comforting returning to a river that I was acquainted with. Even more comforting to see that the level had risen to cover a few more rocks. The schedule called for racing to start on Thursday with the Classic. We'd arrived late Sunday evening after the long drive, giving us just a meagre 3 days to learn the long, continuous course. Racing is hard. That shouldn't really come as a surprise, but not many people realise that thinking is harder. But what is really difficult is doing both at the same time. They seem to pull from the same limited pool of human effort. The harder you pull in a race, the less thinking juice is available, and as tiredness sets in, concentration begins to lapse. Lapses in concentration lead to mistakes. Mistakes cost time and cruelly require more effort to fix. This combination can easily snowball into a catastrophic race run, and therefore we practice. We try to learn every rock, every wave, every little flow ladder the river has to offer. The aim is to know the river like the back of your hand, so, come race day, you can be all pull and no think. In practice though, this is quite hard. On Monday, we did 4 classic runs, 2 in the morning, 2 in the afternoon. I did the first 2 in a wave hopper to probe out all the little rocks. On Tuesday, we did 3, 2 in the morning, 1 in the afternoon. And finally on Wednesday, we did just 1 in the morning so that we could rest up before the race. A grand total of 8 laps, but is that really enough to learn a continuous 17-minute course? No. And if you think otherwise, you're a cocky little dickhead. The first 2 to 3 runs generally get you acquainted with the river. Another few runs and you'll have probably worked out roughly where the racing lines are. Then you'll need at least a couple more laps to glue everything together, and we've not even thought about optimising the line yet. Is it quicker to sneak the other side of that rock? Do you need to be a half foot further over to avoid those waves? Needless to say, committing a whole classic course to memory is no easy task. Mezzana went loosely like this for me. Run 1. Oh my god, where the hell am I? Run 2. Yep, still don't recognise it. Run 3. Ah, I recognise this bit, and I did not want to be here. Run 4. Okay, yeah, I want to be there next time. Run 5. What the hell? There's a rock here too. Run 6. Yep, nice. Got this bit dialed, but now do I want to go left or slightly less left? Run 7. Finally, I think I've got it all stuck together. I just need to avoid that rock at the start. And run 8. Fuck's sake, how do I keep on hitting this rock? Fortunately, we've got a secret weapon, headcams. Headcams are an invaluable tool for helping to learn both classics and sprints. Paddling is hard work, and watching back headcam footage is an easy way to squeeze in extra laps without destroying your body. In between groaning and lying on the floor, evenings on the British team are often spent reviewing the day's footage. We debate lines, identify and fix mistakes, and crucially revise the river until it becomes a part of our souls. It's kinda like F1 drivers practicing on the sim, but with a much lower budget. We had a little bit of fun learning the lines at Mezzana. Alpine rivers have a very different characteristic to our brown British rivers, but by the time Classic Day arrived, I was feeling pretty confident with the lines. Unfortunately though, it wasn't my race. While I put the boat exactly where I wanted it, a smallish mistake at the end, the fast-flowing Alpine river was very heavy on my forearms, which began to cramp up at about the halfway mark. This combined with the dregs of an illness and the need for near constant stroke timing throughout the continuous waves meant that I struggled to really put the hammer down. Still, I've had worse races, and this was an excellent chance to get some Alpine-style water under my belt. A nice pick-me-up came in the form of a raft race that afternoon. We'd noticed it in the schedule on the drive over, and thought it'd be a good lark. When Jamie, our team leader, asked at the briefing about entering, there was some umming and ahhing from the organisers until they concluded, yes, Yes, we could enter. What we hadn't realised is that the raft race wasn't just a mere jolly, and was actually part of the Rafting World Cup. It also wasn't just the one race, with a raft classic and sprint on that first day of racing, followed by raft slalom and raft cross in the days after. A lot of bang for our buck at €15, and we even got a little bit of bonus stash. They didn't even ask how competent we were, which was probably a good thing. Somehow, I was the most experienced rafter in our boat, thanks to actually having been in a raft before. Never mind that was probably 8 years back. Making up the rest of our men's British boat was Andrew, who paddles C1, which is sort of like a raft, Leon, who has been in C2s in the past, and a totally unexperienced American who had press-ganged into racing. A second British boat was entered into the mixed category, consisting of all 3 Christies and honorary Christie, Rob. We didn't exactly fancy ourselves as ringers. Not since we discovered it was a World Cup, but somehow we didn't end up finishing last, so the British rafting team better watch their backs. Doing the raft races the day before sprint heats probably wasn't the best race prep, but nobody in our team was really targeting the sprint, and the rafting was quite a lot of fun. However, Andrew still made it through to the finals in C1 and C2 with Jamie, despite a little dip, and the Christie girls also qualified their C2 for the final. No dips required. Maybe one day I'll make a final too, but I've got a lot to improve on the sprint. My Heat 1 line was fairly on point, but my technique often seems to fall apart in the heat of the moment. Jamie provided me with some much needed advice for the second run, to avoid upping the rate too high, and just focus on connecting with each paddle stroke and pulling hard. This seemed to work wonders, but unfortunately my line in the second run took me through a lot of the chop. Still, I was only 1 second slower when compared to the first run, which was a much better margin than most of the field. However, I was still a long way off the final, so we'll just call that another learning experience. Obviously, the main event for us that day was the raft slalom. It was about as chaotic as you'd expect. There was a lot of constructive shouting aboard our raft, and between the 2 runs we did manage to get all of the gates. Unfortunately though, we didn't manage to get all of them in a single run, but once again, we weren't last. Without a team race at the World Cups, and with no finals for myself, this was sadly my last day of racing for the event, but we wouldn't let that be the last of our paddling. Throughout the week, Jamie had been reminiscing of the 1993 World Championships he'd raced in. That race had been held on a different section of river, somewhere below Mezzana, and we all, or well, mostly, thought it'd be fun to go check this part of the river out on finals morning. This was part of the section I'd paddled previous in a plastic boat. I was again back in a plastic boat, but now it was a much more lively wave hopper. This turned out to be quite a good decision, as the river had dropped a tad, and definitely would have been a bit better with a little more water. But bouncing off rocks was a lot of fun in the wave hopper, although slightly less fun for everyone else on composite boats, and there were definitely clean lines through everything, bar maybe the big weir drop. But learning these lines properly would take a fair bit of work and quite a bit of trial and error. Kinda like Trenyak, really. Still, this was a great section of river and something I'd love to paddle again. It was so much fun that, thanks to a small miscommunication, I sailed right past the get-out, which I previously camped at, and right round the corner. I survived the experience, but Leon, who followed me, was less than impressed. We finished off the morning with a couple of farewell classic laps, before hanging around to watch the sprint finals and have a couple of well-earned beers. There was also a small party, which was a nice chance to let loose and get a little better acquainted with some of the other teams, although that's all I'm allowed to say on that. The only thing left to do on Sunday for Rob, Leon and myself was a leisurely sightseeing drive over to Verona Airport. Our underpowered little hire car strained itself to drag us over stunning mountain passes, and we had a lovely little dip in Lake Garda. Inevitably, the flight was delayed into the early hours of the morning, and I had to sleep on the airport floor before getting into work late on Monday. 10 out of 10, would do again.
I don't like that line. goodness. There's a shower through here.